Welcome back, family, to the South Florida Recruiting Report. Marcus Benjamin here, representing for On Three Rivals, bringing you recruiting news throughout the state of Florida. Talk recruiting, talk the 2026 class, talk recruiting of the Big Three, which recruits always in jeopardy to sign with their committed school. And here to talk about it all, I've got my guy, John Garcia Jr., back in the building to talk to me a little bit about recruiting. He's now representing for Prospex Media Sports Management Company. John, great to see you. First off, just kind of tell me about your new endeavor and how that's going.
Yeah, it's a little different, right? It's a startup where we're on the other side of the business, right? We're dealing with the athletes from a consultation perspective to try to help them navigate this craziness. So we used to cover it, and now we're on the other side of it. But of course, there's still a lot of content. We've got a podcast, social media, all of those things. So still doing a lot of what is most familiar, but also learning and being challenged in new areas, which obviously is important in terms of growth. Very happy to get going with Cliff Hill and the guys. A lot of IMG kids on our roster, a lot of kids throughout the state of Florida, which is really the foundation of our roster. So it was a natural fit in that regard for sure.
Awesome. John Garcia is a veteran in the recruiting industry, and he's kind enough to join me here on the South Florida Recruiting Report. Now, to kind of look at these three classes, Miami, Florida, and Florida State, they're just chock full of great talent up and down the line when you look at them. But let's start with Florida because Florida, let's call it what it is. Billy Napier is on the hot seat, and he keeps losing games, and he'll likely lose his job. And Florida likely loses a ton of recruits, which means a lot of teams may be interested in a lot of these guys, and they've got some guys on in that particular class. When you look at the which player kind of jumps out to you like, man, if I'm a program, I want to snatch up that guy.
Yeah, Marcus, I think that list starts, first of all, great O line class headed to UF. I think that entire group will be at least, contacted here in the near future if they haven't already. But I'm looking at the other side of the ball. I think O line is deep in this class. I think the defensive line is not quite as deep. So Kendall Guerville, the big defensive tackle out of Fort Myers, Florida, I think he's a guy who, in a group that is not as star studded, a defensive tackle class that is not as big and deep from a national perspective, I think he's going to have even more increased value as we get closer to the early signing period. It was a hotly contested battle before he picked Florida. Miami, Texas, Georgia, a lot of programs were very high on Kendall, and that was reciprocated. So there's certainly a lot of visits to his name, in addition to just the need for a big physical defensive tackle. He's got some pass rushing upside. He's got some physical upside and great length to play the run as well. So I think he's a guy who could become the most coveted of those Florida recruits if and when Billy Napier's fate is determined by the administration there in Gainesville.
All right, John, I am back, man. That was kind of crazy that I got knocked out like that. I did connect to my hotspot here. I'm not sure why the Wi-Fi in the building not working as well. But we still got 3 viewers here, so that's impressive.
Shout out to you guys. Shout out.
That is definitely impressive here. So I'm gonna kind of re-ask the question here about Florida's class. Just when you're looking up and down at this class, should Billy Napier get canned here? Which recruits are should be the most appealing for other programs to try to snatch up?
Yeah, Marcus, I'm looking at the big bodies. I really like the O line group UF has verbally committed right now. I have Carr out of IMG. You've got, several extremely lengthy tackle prospects, Chancellor Campbell probably leading that group. But I think there's even more prowess on the other side of the ball. Not as much volume, but defensive tackle. We've talked about this, going back to when we were colleagues multiple times. It's just not a great defensive line class, and specifically not a great defensive tackle class nationally. So I think Kendall Guerville has an opportunity to, look, from an NIL perspective, very much command more attention. But look, just from a bodies perspective, not a great class. He's got the height, weight, length, requisite measurements that everybody's looking for. And he was extremely coveted before picking Florida. Remember, Miami was heavy in there. Texas, Georgia was probably the favorite for some time for Kendall. So I think he's one of the first players that other schools will certainly, at a minimum, check in on. Hey, how's it going through the process? Any chances you take visits again? He does have some availability from an official visit perspective. Does a new program get in? FSU was in there a little bit for him as well. So it was really at one point a pretty wide open deal for Guerville. So I do think, he's a guy in a weaker defensive tackle class that would immediately command attention. And honestly, Marcus, he's probably already, at least his camp, his agent, somebody is already probably fielding some phone calls because there's just not that many players at that size that are available in this class. So I think he's maybe the guy who would be the most coveted. But if you look at the top of the class, like you're showing here, a lot to like. CJ Brunon's as fast as it gets at the point. Edge that Florida has put together. I think that group would be challenged primarily if and when something happens.
Yeah, I agree with you about Kendall Gurville. I do believe he's going through rehab process with an ACL injury, but he's still a very coveted player just because of, like you said, the lack of just really big bodies in this particular class here. It's just not a lot of really high quality defensive linemen. So when you got one, you definitely want to hold on to him, or if you see one, you definitely want to grab him as well. For me, I definitely like Marquez Daniel. I think he definitely is a player that is worth taking a flyer on for sure. Explosive wide receiver, 4 star, is coveted mostly by Miami and Auburn. As far as I know, are in the mix. Uh, Florida won this battle over Texas, so it's possible that they could be in the mix as well if he indeed becomes available. So I think he's one of those guys that you gotta definitely consider for this 2026 class here at the Gators, which, like we said, definitely could be a lot of these guys available should Billy Napier and his staff uh, asked to be, seek the exits here if they keep losing games. Another class I think it you have to kind of consider here is Florida State. Now, Florida State, all of a sudden, this team that beat Alabama is now on a 3 game losing streak, and this team, I don't know, they could continue to tumble. Who knows? The ACC I think is always underrated. I think at any given Saturday, you could lose in this conference. And as we saw last week with Florida State losing to Pitt at home, when you look at that Florida State class, are there any recruits that definitely catch your eye as like, hey, this guy would be a nice addition to a class?
Yeah, I think I'll go with not to be the doctor in the room, but I'll go with another injured guy. I think Isaiah Williams is still that guy. I think because of how many commitments he's made. Even though this last one at FSU came with a shutdown, and he has only visited Tallahassee since. I think because of the recruiting craziness, there was kind of an apathy towards his game. But on the other side of it, there's a reason why so many schools continue to recruit him. So many schools campaign heavily financially for official visits, even through the shutdown with Florida State, which we broke, in the summer. So, you know, we talk about the lack of defensive tackle talent. I think three down linebackers, that's another big question mark in this class. And Isaiah has legitimate pass rush experience. And if you look at that Florida State team composition this year, it's the defense, right? I mean, the offense is scoring, the offense is entertaining at a minimum. Yes, they turn it over a lot, but they do put up points. Have big comeback against Miami, obviously put up 40 plus against Virginia, and 30 plus against Pitt. That group isn't the clear issue. I think it's the defense. So naturally, you look at an Isaiah Williams, a Chauncey Kennan, those guys look like they might be positioned to play day one in Tallahassee. So I think that is a huge part. I know that's a huge part of the plan, for Isaiah with this FSU commitment. So I still think there's a ton of talent there. Again, legitimately could become an edge. I mean, you don't want to throw out crazy comps, but I've gotten Jalen Walker vibes from Isaiah pretty much from the first time I scouted him, 18 months ago. Big, physical, extremely explosive. Everyone saw the 4.4 laser that he ran this offseason, and it translates on tape. I mean, this is a ferocious downhill player who can make plays, against the run, but certainly in the passing game and in the pass rush game, perhaps most importantly. So even though, again, he's also coming off of an ACL, it's 2025. I don't think that scares people like it used to. And in some respects, it could be a way to focus and get better everywhere, not just rehabbing the injury, but focus on the weight room and get stronger everywhere simultaneously. So I do think he would be a guy that, once again, a lot of programs really work to try to get back on campus. I mean, you talk about, committed to Ole Miss. Miami was in there. Florida was the favorite forever. Grew up a big Gator fan. Georgia was really heavy on Isaiah throughout the bulk of his recruitment. Texas was in there at some point. I mean, this is a who's who list of programs. So wouldn't shock anyone if they all began to circle back. And especially because, he's made some changes in his past in terms of where he wanted to go to school. And I think obviously Chauncey Kennan being the highest ranked player, that's another one that would get attention. But there's been this very public loyalty to FSU, from Chauncey's perspective. So I think that one would be a much harder pull for another program. But certainly, again, talent, premium position, all of that stuff will still warrant attention for sure. But there's no doubt these defensive recruits feel like they can maybe see the field year one, and perhaps day one in Tallahassee. And so it's no surprise that that's the top of what FSU is bringing in.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm going to throw out a name myself. Being from South Florida, I kind of focus on the South Florida guys here. Tadarius Hughes, I think, is a player that is someone who I think a lot of teams would love to have in their class. Just a lengthy defensive back, can play corner, can play safety as well at a very high level. This is a guy that Miami likes a lot. Nebraska is very much interested as well. into Darius Hughes, and I think he can only get better too. He's got the length, and he's got the coverage skills to play at a high level on the college level, and perhaps maybe a little bit underrated. I think he's a guy who will put on size as his career progresses, but I think he's got the instincts and the IQ to really kind of be an impact for a college football team, as maybe as soon as next season. So I think that's a player that you definitely gotta kind of have to look at. And then another player is definitely Brandon Bennett, just because you can't teach speed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's had a couple of soft tissue injuries this season here in the senior season, but he's just an explosive player, and if you can stretch the field, that opens up your offense tremendously. It feels like Florida State really doesn't have that right now on their roster. But Brandon Bennett could definitely get in to you know on offense and just really kind of expand your playbook. So those are definitely two guys that I would definitely consider. He seems very locked in with Florida State, from what I remember, but I do believe Georgia is still in the mix, as well as Florida, still trying to contact him. But he's still locked in with Florida State, as well as to Darius Hughes. But you just kind of never know with the season for the Seminoles and just how much it could possibly tumble, just based on this 3-game losing streak that they're currently on. But now let's go down to Miami, man. Miami, that's a team that it's that's definitely rolling as far as the big three is concerned. They're looking to build their class. They're the class that's looking to add one of these guys that we've already mentioned to their class, just because they are currently rolling right now, the number 2 team in the country. But you still kind of want to look at this class and really see like who could actually make an impact in 2026. And when you look at that Miami class, John, who kind of jumps out to you as a guy that I would say, if you are like, I don't know, a top team in the nation, like an Ohio State or an Ole Miss or something, and or Texas A&M, and you're in the top 5, and you're trying to flip one of these Miami guys, which one would you try to flip?
Well, look, I think, the low hanging fruit is Jackson Cantwell. I mean, just in terms of the floor, in terms of what you look for up front, I mean, he's got every single box checked, from a football perspective, from a bloodline perspective, being the son of Olympians. And now we've seen him compete at the highest level, right, in the All-American circuit, allowing juniors to play this past January. We saw every single day Jackson Cantwell dominant against fellow elite players, which coming out of Nixon, Missouri was really the only question mark left for Jackson. And he did it out of position, playing right tackle as well. So, I mean, that's the obvious answer, but I'm going to go to South Florida as well here. And every time we watch Jordan Campbell, something exciting happens. He's another hybrid. We talked about Isaiah Williams earlier. If Isaiah is not the best hybrid backer in the country, it's probably Jordan Campbell, a guy who has unbelievable length and instincts to his name. And that combination allows for tangible pass rush production, 17 sacks as a sophomore a couple years ago. And he's played running back at a high level. He's played off-ball linebacker at a high level. Just a ferocious prospect when it comes to, see ball, get ball, seek and destroy. He can play sideline to sideline. And again, we talk about that pass rush pedigree. It's so strong that, we hear at Miami, they're talking maybe he's just an edge. Maybe we just leave him there and allow him to grow and fill out and become, just that weak side pass rusher that frustrates every program, right? Because if you're on the weak side, you're coming from the quarterback's front side, right? So you'd be that first flash that a potential quarterback could see. So that is how high Miami is on Jordan Campbell, and we've seen a lot of other programs gravitate towards that versatile hybrid pass rusher projection. And that's obviously, after quarterback, pass rushers and offensive tackles are really, the most important spots when it comes to roster building. But I like a lot of these defensive recruits. I think many are underrated. Many are high floor guys. I think Ashari Charles is as good as any, third down pass rush guy in the country. He's polished. He's got a great skill set. And then I go to the back end. Brody Jennings, another one. Family has been, at the highest of levels in this sport, and he looks like the most polished of all of them coming out of high school. Just extremely technical. We saw it in the offseason. We see it on Friday nights. That Miami secondary is very, transfer portal laden right now. So after this year, there could be some room for some young guys to splash. And I think he's a guy that with that technicality could really come in and command attention as a cover corner or maybe even a nickel down the line. But as you would expect, Mario Cristobal's recruiting really well. Miami's rolling on the field, as you said. So it's a very strong class, and the likelihood of it getting stronger seems pretty good here in the next few months.
Yeah, this class did get stronger because Kenton Dobson reclassed from 2027 to 26. So this was already a really strong defensive back class. And then you add Kent to the mix, and it's just seems like an embarrassment of riches to me because Jalen Waters is a defensive back who I really like. I feel like he can cover all over the field. He's really rangy corner that can can lock you down in man-to-man and zone coverage. And then you got John Tavius Wyman, another very good defensive back who can lock you down in man-to-man. And then you want to add Kent to the mix, and I think Kent can be a lot of different things as well. I mean, he's just a specimen when you watch him on the field. A very smart player. Obviously, he's smart enough to reclass and start his college career in January as a 17-year-old, just like Malachi Tony did. So I'm really impressed with this defensive back class, and that's not even talking about Cortez Redding and not even talking about Camden Portis, who has a bunch of upside in itself. It's just this defensive back class. I think they might even this Miami staff might even be surprised at just how great this class is. I think it's still kind of lacking in linebacker and defensive linemen, just like a lot of other classes in the nation. So they could add a little bit more there. They're on the search for a lot of other guys, like Nolan Wilson is definitely a guy that they're coveting. They're still trying to flip DeAnthony Lafayette, who earlier last week shut down his recruitment, but that hasn't stopped Miami to trying to pursue him. So there's just really a ton of guys here that I think can make an impact in year one. But overall, I just think Kenton Dobson is probably the guy that you want just because he just has that much upside to grow. This guy can probably start for a lot of college football teams starting next season. Probably maybe won't start for the Hurricanes next year just because, there's just so much talent already on that roster in the defensive backfield. There will be a lot of turnover naturally, but it's kind of hard to believe that players like, Damari Brown would leave the program. And, OJ Frederic still has another a year left to show what he can do. So it would be hard to believe that he would start next season. I wouldn't doubt it. But I think he just has, after 2-3 years, can you imagine what this kid looks like? He's going to be an absolute monster. So I think he's the guy that you definitely want to get on your roster or keep on your roster. or class if you're the Miami Hurricanes. All right, so that's the big three as far as the classes are concerned, man. John Garcia of Prospex Management Group was kind enough to join me today, talk a little South Florida recruiting. Glad to see him back here on the podcast. Now it's rebranded as the South Florida Recruiting Report. Hopefully, we'll get to see each other again soon, John.
You know it, boss. Thanks for having me.
All right, I appreciate it, man. Like I said, that is going to wrap it up for the South Florida Recruiting Report. Make sure you tune in to Rivals on 3 for more recruiting news from yours truly. Until next episode.